Good morning. Happy, it's Tuesday, right? Happy Tuesday? Is it Tuesday? Tuesday. My treadmill going here. All right. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I just finished up a go live this morning. I've been up and working since 5, so I decided to take a little break and get on the treadmill, get my Bible in, and then I'll have some quick breakfast this morning. And yeah, all right, so let's jump right in. June 8th. Advice, good morning, Karen. Advice for old and young. Ecclesiastes 11:7 through 12:8. Light is sweet. How pleasant to see a new day dawning. When people live to be very old, let them rejoice in every day of life. But let them also remember there were many dark days. Everything still to come is meaningless. Young people, it is wonderful to be young. Enjoy every minute of it. Do everything you want to do. Take it all in. But remember that you must give an account to God for everything you do. So refuse to worry and keep your body healthy. But remember that youth with whole life before you is meaningless. Don't let the excitement of youth cause you to forget your Creator. Honor Him in your youth before you grow old and say, life is not pleasant anymore. Remember Him before the light of the sun, moon, and stars is dim in your old eyes, and rain clouds continually darken your sky. Remember Him before your legs, the guards of your house, start to tremble, and before your shoulders, the strong men stoop. Remember Him before your teeth, your few remaining servants, stop grinding, and before your eyes, the woman looking through the windows, see dimly. Remember Him before the door to life's opportunities is closed and the sound of work fades. Now you rise at the first chirping of the birds, but then all their sound will grow faint. Remember Him before you become fearful of falling and worry about danger in the streets, before your hair turns white like an almond tree in bloom, and you drag along with energy like a dying grasshopper, and the capeberry no longer inspires sexual desire. Remember Him before you near the grave, your everlasting home, where the mourners will weep at your funeral. Yes, remember the Creator now, while you are young, before the silver cord of life snaps and the golden bowl is broken. Don't wait until the water jar is smashed at the spring and the pulley is broken at the well, for then the dust will return to earth, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher, completely meaningless. Concluding thoughts, Ecclesiastes 12:9 through 14. Keep this in mind. The teacher was considered wise, and he taught people everything he knew. He listened carefully to many proverbs, studying and classifying them. The teacher sought to find just the right words to express truths clearly. The words of the wise are like cattle prods, painful but helpful. Their collected sayings are like a nail-studded stick with which a shepherd drives the sheep. But my child, let me give you some further advice. Be careful, for writing books is endless, and much study wears you out. That's the whole story. Here is my final conclusion. Fear God and obey His commands, for this is everyone's duty. God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. I think this is an interesting book. Yesterday, after reading it, I was like, this book is depressing. He keeps saying this is meaningless and that's meaningless and this has no worth and why do this and there's no afterlife and it's just you go to the grave and you're done. And I thought that is so contradictory to everything I read in the New Testament. So I was doing some research and some study yesterday about it and was learning how this is not written from a teaching perspective. It's written from somebody who was seeking his purpose, who didn't know about afterlife at the time. He didn't understand afterlife. He didn't have the hope of Christ like we have the hope of Christ. And he was speaking from a heavy heart. And what I was reading, it was from Focus on the Family, said that it shows the human spirit and the urge we all have to complain and moan and woe is me, nothing is any good. That's our human nature to do that, and it shows the human nature of even Solomon. So I thought it was interesting anyway. So do some research because it's interesting the book of Ecclesiastes. Don't let it make you sad. Because life is really not meaningless. He thought it was, but it's not. Because we have the hope of Christ. So, okay. The northern tribes revolt. 1 Kings 12, 1 through 20, which was around 930 BC. Rehoboam went to Shechem, where all Israel gathered to make him king. When Rehoboam, son of Nebat, heard of this, he returned from Egypt, for he had fled to Egypt to escape from King Solomon. The leaders of Israel summoned, and Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel went to speak with Rehoboam. Your father was a hard master, they said. Lighten the harsh labor demands and heavy taxes that your father imposed on us. Then we will be your loyal subjects. Rehoboam replied, Give me 3 days to think this over, then come back for my answer. So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam discussed the matter with older men who had counseled his father Solomon. What is your advice? He asked. How should I answer these people? The older counselors replied, If you are willing to be a servant to these people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subjects. But Rehoboam rejected the advice of the older men and instead asked the opinion of the young men who had grown up with him and now were his advisors. What is your advice? He asked. How should I answer these people who want me to lighten the burdens imposed by my father? The young men replied, This is what you should tell those complainers who want to lighten their burden. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Yes, my father laid very heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions. 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to hear Rehoboam's decision, just as the king had ordered. But Rehoboam spoke harshly to the people, for he rejected the advice of older counselors and followed the counsel of his younger advisors. He told the people, My father laid heavy burdens on you, but I am going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions. So the king paid no attention to the people. This turn of the events was the will of the Lord, for it fulfilled the Lord's message to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through the prophet Ahijah from Shiloh. When all of Israel realized that the king had refused to listen to them, they responded, Down with the dynasty of David. We have no interest in the son of Jesse. Back to your homes, O Israel. Look out for your own houses, O David. So the people of Israel returned home, but Rehoboam continued to rule over the Israelites who lived in the towns of Judah. King Rehoboam sent Adoniram, who was in charge of the forced labor, to restore order, but the people of Israel stoned him to death. When the news reached King Rehoboam, he quickly jumped into his chariot and fled to Jerusalem. And to this day, the northern tribes of Israel have refused to be ruled by a descendant of David. When the people of Israel learned of Jeroboam's return from Egypt, they called an assembly and made him king over all of Israel. So only the tribe of Judah remained loyal to the family of David. 2 Chronicles 10, 1 through 19. Rehoboam went to Shechem, where all of Israel had gathered to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard of this, he returned from Egypt, for he had fled to Egypt to escape King Solomon. The leaders of Israel summoned him, and Jeroboam and all of Israel went to speak with Rehoboam. Your father was a hard master. Lighten the harsh labor demands and heavy taxes that your father imposed on us. Then we will be your loyal subjects. Rehoboam replied, Come back in 3 days for my answer. So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam discussed the matter with the older men who had counseled his father Solomon. What is your advice? He asked. How should I answer these people? The older counselors replied, If you are good to this people and do your best to please them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subjects. But Rehoboam rejected the advice of the older men and instead asked the opinion of the young men who had grown up with him, who were now his advisors. What is your advice? He asked them. How should I answer these people who want me to lighten the burdens imposed by my father? The young men replied, This is what you should tell these complainers who want a lighter burden. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Yes, my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beats you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions. 3 days later, Jeroboam and all of the people returned to hear Rehoboam's decision, just as the king had ordered. But Rehoboam spoke harshly to them, for he rejected the advice of the older counselors and followed the counsel of his younger advisors. He told the people, My father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions. So the king paid no attention to the people. This turn of events was the will of God, for it fulfilled the Lord's message to Rehoboam, son of Nebat, through the prophet Ahijah from Shiloh. When all of Israel realized that the king had refused to listen to them, they responded, "Down with the dynasty of David. We have no interest in the son of Jesse. Back to your homes, O Israel. Look out for your own house, O David." So all of the people of Israel returned home, but Rehoboam continued to rule over the Israelites who lived in the town of Judah. King Rehoboam sent Adoniram, who was in charge of the forced labor, to restore order, but the people of Israel just stoned him to death. When the news reached King Rehoboam, he quickly jumped into his chariot and fled to Jerusalem, and to this day the northern tribes of Israel have refused to be ruled by a descendant of David. I can't read that next word. Shemaiah's prophecy. 1 Kings 12:21 through 24. When Rehoboam arrived at Jerusalem, he mobilized the men of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 select troops, to fight against the men of Israel and to restore the kingdom to himself. But God said to Shemaiah, the man of God, "Say to Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all of the people of Judah and Benjamin, and to the rest of the people, this is what the Lord says. Do not fight against your relatives, the Israelites. Go back home, for what has happened is my doing." So they obeyed the message of the Lord and went home as the Lord had commanded. 2 Chronicles 11:1 through 4. When Rehoboam arrived at Jerusalem, he mobilized the men of Judah and Benjamin, 180,000 select troops, to fight against Israel and to restore the kingdom to himself. But the Lord said to Shemaiah, the man of God, "Say to Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all the Israelites in Judah and Benjamin, this is what the Lord says. Do not fight against your relatives. Go back home, for what has happened is my doing." So they obeyed the message of the Lord and did not fight against Jeroboam. Jeroboam makes gold calves. 1 Kings 12:25 through 33. Jeroboam then built up the city of Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim, and it became his capital. Later he went and built up in the town of Peniel. Jeroboam thought to himself, "Unless I am careful, the kings will return to the dynasty of David. When these people go to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord, they will again give their allegiance to King Rehoboam of Judah. They will kill me and make him their king instead." So on the advice of his counselors, the king made 2 gold calves. He said to the people, It is too much trouble for you to worship in Jerusalem. Look, Israel, these are the gods who brought you out of Egypt." He placed these calf idols in Bethel and in Dan, and in the other end of his kingdom. But this became a great sin, for the people worshipped the idols, traveling as far north as Dan to worship the one there. Does that not blow your mind? That just totally blows me away when I read something like that. So with the advice of the counselors, the king made 2 gold calves and set them up. And then he says to the people of Israel, "Hey, it's too much trouble for you to worship God. Worship these calves. They're the one that brought you out of Egypt." Are the people not like, gold calves? How did they bring me out of Egypt? It blows my mind that they're like, "Oh, okay." There has to be deeper information that I'm not picking up. It just blows my mind. I don't get it. Jeroboam also erected buildings at the pagan shrines and the ordained priests from the common people, those who were not from the priestly tribe of Levi. And Jeroboam instituted a religious festival in Bethel, held on the 15th day of the 8th month, in imitation of the annual festival of shelters in Judah. There at Bethel, he himself offered sacrifices to the calves he had made, and he appointed priests for the pagan shrines he had made. So on the 15th day of the 8th month, a day that he himself had designated, Jeroboam offered sacrifices on the altar at Bethel. He instituted a religious festival for Israel, and he went up to the altar to burn incense. Rehoboam fortifies Judah. 2 Chronicles 11:5 through 17. Rehoboam remained in Jerusalem and fortified various towns for the defense of Judah. He built up Bethlehem, Edom, Tekoa, Beth-zur, Soko, Adullam, Gath, Maresheth, Ziph, Adoraim, Lachish, Azekah, Zorah, Ajalon, and Hebron. These became the fortified towns of Judah and Benjamin. Rehoboam strengthened their defense and stationed commanders in them, and he stored supplies and food, olive oil, and wine. He also put shields and spears in these towns for a further safety measure. So only Judah and Benjamin remained under his control. But all the priests and Levites living among the northern tribes of Israel sided with Rehoboam. The Levites even abandoned their pasture lands and property and moved to Judah and Jerusalem because of Jeroboam, and his sons were not allowed to serve the Lord as priests. Jeroboam appointed his own priests to serve at the pagan shrines, where they worshiped the goat and calf idols he had made. From all the tribes of Israel, those who sincerely wanted to worship the Lord, the God of Israel, followed the Levites to Jerusalem, where they could offer sacrifices to the Lord, the God of their ancestors. This strengthened the kingdom of Judah, and for 3 years they supported Rehoboam, son of Solomon, for during those years they faithfully followed in the footsteps of David and Solomon. All right. I guess that's right, Faith. They just follow along with whatever they're told. Like, it blows my mind. All right. Woo! That stopped quicker than I expected. All right, guys. I'm going to go upstairs after I show off my armpits, which I didn't mean to do. Nobody likes an armpit. I'm going to go upstairs and make breakfast, but my breakfast today is going to be bulletproof coffee of some kind. I think I have a recipe in mind that I'm going to make, but I want to have a drinkable, quick breakfast this morning because I had to go live and it's getting later in the morning and I want to get breakfast done and going so that I can get back to work. So I'll be upstairs live in a few minutes for breakfast. Yeah, that's it. I hope you all have a blessed Tuesday. I hope you get to be a blessing to somebody today. I hope that this was a blessing to you. And I'll see you back tomorrow for more chronological devotion reading. Have a great day, you guys. Bye.